on.
Mazal tov.
And Mazal Tov. It's always a mitzvah to take care of your wife and kids. And at least I could confess I know how to barbecue and cook eggs. So it's very important to know the laws of kashrus in the kitchen. First of all, the husband should really be the rabbi of his house.
Wait, so you're getting married or you're already married?
I just got engaged last week.
We got engaged last week. So
Yes, last week.
So there's a joke regarding a husband. I just told you guys, but we'll say it on camera. It's good to start. It says one time a couple got married and the wife was shocked the first morning.
It's clearly a joke.
The first morning, the husband comes with a 5-course breakfast: waffles, pancakes, eggs, calapache, egg benedicts, you name it, smoothie.
Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
Yeah, the wife is shocked. He says, "Thank you so much. I never knew you're such a gentleman." He said, "No, I'm just teaching you how you should serve me every morning. It should be a..." So, but out of all the, I spend almost 4 years of my life studying almost 10, 12 hours a day, getting smicha from Ner Yisrael, Yaira. One of the most important things that we spent, the thing that we spent the most time was the laws of Nida. But after that was the laws of Basar B'chalav. And almost, I would say on a monthly, this question regarding, we know we Jews are not allowed to have meat and milk together, and our equipment, our pots and pans that we cook meat and meat should also be separate. Now the question is regarding parv food. Parv is food that is neither milky, neither dairy nor meat. If you cook potatoes, eggs, fish in those, can those be eaten with milk and meat or not? So this is the sugya, if you want to look it up. Our shiur today is based on a shiur of Harav Yitzchak Yosef that he gave several years ago, and it's the sugya of NATBARNAT. The sugya of NATBARNAT is a very important sugya. It's the whole sugya of the almost $1 billion kashrus industry, dairy equipment. You know how some things are... Unfortunately, the OU decided, since we're in the galut of Ashkenazim, everything has a DE, OUD on it, even though there's no... You look in the ingredients, it says... So this has to do with that also, because Sfardim were more lenient on it as... So what does NATBARNAT mean? And then we're going to give very concrete examples. And please remind me at the end that there's one common mistake people make that could throw a monkey wrench in this, and that's if they use a... I just want to say it shortly, then I'll say more be'iyun. That it's very important, if you want not to get into kashrut problems, if you want to use this heter that I'm going to explain to you, right? It's very important to have 3 different types of knives. Ones that are parev, right? That you only cut vegetables and fish or eggs with, not meat or anything dairy, and then you have things that you cut your roast and beef with, and then things that you cut your pizza and cheese with. If you have 3 different types of knives, then you could use this heter and you won't get into trouble, and it'll make life much more easier. Now, what is NATBARNAT? NATBARNAT means noten tam benoten tam. Here's a very important concept that we have to know in the kosher kitchen, and that is, not only is it forbidden us to have meat and milk together, but anything that's cooked in a pot that you usually cook your choresht, your spaghetti and meatballs with, right? Your steaks with, it gets the status of meat. Because the ta'am, right? The taste gets absorbed in the walls. Same thing by dairy. So noten tam by noten tam means that it's a secondary taste. You understand? It's not directly the meat itself. It's the taste that went into the taste. So here's the sugya. We're going to start. The Gemara in Chulin is a fascinating machlokes, page 111, 111b. It says itmar, dagim. Let's say you have fish. Sha'alu bekara. These fish were roasted, baked, cooked, fried, whatever, in a pot that you usually cook your meatloaf, your meat foods in. And number one thing you have to understand, we're going to read the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 95 in Yoredeya, and Maran says it very clearly, but I just want to say, NATBARNAT, this whole heter that it's going to come out according to those that hold like Rav Ovadia and don't go like the Ben Ishchai, go strictly like the Shulchan Aruch and many of the Sfardim Poskim, that we're more lenient than the Ashkenazim by dairy equipment, is whatever you're cooking in is pristinely clean, right? There's no grease or residue of the dairy or meat, right? When you cook the parva food in the dairy pot or the meat pot, it's like women clean it, not like yeshiva bachrim. Like you go to yeshiva dorm and they're like toaster oven and like their different equipment there is not appropriately clean. It's to a high clean standard. I call it the woman's standard. It's clean. So Rav and Shmuel in the Gemara have a machlekes. These fish that was cooked in meat equipment. Rav says it's usher to eat it in kutach. Do you guys know what kutach is?
No.
Kutach habavli was an ancient dip like hummus. Okay? Imagine hummus, but it was like salty and it had dairy in it. It had like buttery dairy in it. They used to dip a lot of their foods in this kutach habavli. It was a Babylonian food. So very simple question the Gemara proposes. I have cooked in a clean pot, even ben yomo. So let's say early in the morning, one of my favorite foods that my dad used to, God bless his soul, make for me was eggs and chopped up hot dogs. You fry them together, they taste so amazing. His nephew is sitting right here. My dad was a good cook. So he, so now you clean out this pan, right? So morning you had fried hot dogs in it. You clean out the pan. Now for lunch, you put, you cook some salmon in it. This salmon, the Gemara is saying, can I dip it into my dairy hummus dip, right? Or no? Rav says it's asur. Why? Because since it was cooked in the morning, it's ben yomo. It somehow absorbs some of the taste of the meat. It's asur. So this is Gemara Chulin 111, page 111b.
Shouldn't that have an inherent problem because it's fish and meat?
No, that's another thing we're not going to get. Rav Yitzhak Yosef gets into that, but that's above the scope of this shir. Because, Dr. Sam, a lot of the time, when I give a shir, also I try to give it I even want beginners to understand it. I don't want to get it like super, understand, advanced. And I don't want to get into too many different sugyas. I want to be laser focused on NATBARNAT. That's another question that the poskim do bring up, but it seems to not be a problem, clearly from the Gemara. Shmuel argues, on almost every page of the Talmud, you have Ravina, Ravashi, you have Rav and Shmuel, right? Rabbi Yechon and Rish Lakish. Shmuel vehemently argues. Shmuel says, no, Baba, you can take this fish and dip it into your kutach habavli, your dairy hummus dip, and enjoy it as a nice topping. Now, the issue over here is, why does Shmuel say that? So this is the fundamental thing you have to understand about this whole sugya. NATBARNAT says, and this is, by the way, Bipaskin like Shmuel, by the way. We say, what's going on? So imagine this is the pot that we cooked in, right? Right? So you're telling me that the taste of the meat, the hot dog, somehow got into this fish, right? Because in the morning, remember the case I explained? The NATBARNAT means that taste is so weak already that taste of meat is not going to prohibit you. It's so watered down that it's not powerful enough for you to prohibit you to have a glass of milk or dip your fish into the kutach habavli, some dairy type. Even today in Trader Joe's, you go, there are some hummuses that do have dairy in it, milk in it. So you're allowed to have it. Now, we see that all the poskim like Shemuel. Now the question is why? Because one of the most important laws, with your brother actually, we learn almost a few hours a day, sometimes 6-7 hours, sometimes 5-6 hours a day. We learn the laws of Choshen Mishpat. There's one of the most important klalim, general rules of the Talmud is, whenever something is prohibited, like terefa or kasher, right? In isurin, not the laws of monetary, choshen mishpat. Monetary, always the laws like Shmuel. But when it comes to is something prohibited or permitted, the isuri, something is forbidden or not, always the halacha is like Rav. So Rabbi Yitzchak brings, why don't we paskin like Rav here? We paskin that you are allowed NATBARNAT, the hetera, right? Basically, I explained to you, the rationale is this taste, any taste that did exist here has so watered down that now this fish, you could have it with whatever you like. You could have it with meat, you could have it with... So the answer to this question is yes, true. One of the most concrete and common halachas is that the Rif, if you look at the Rif and the Rambam, always usually in the laws, push comes to shove, when we don't know if there's a machlokes, a dispute between Rav and Shmuel, if it's regarding business law, right? Financial law, we paskin like Shmuel, but this is whether you could eat something or not. It's isurim, so we should paskin like Rav. The answer is that if you look in the Gemara, subsequent Gemara, there's many stories that Abaya brings and Chizkiah brings that many Amoraim did eat the NATBARNAT, the food, this fish with dairy, with the kutach. So since you see that Abaye, which was one of the last people in the Talmud, their custom was not to follow Rav, right? So, if you learn Kosher Mishma, you're right. You learn one important thing. Every rule has an exception, right? So yes, the general rule is that usually we do follow Rav. It would be appropriate to follow Rav in such instances because it's an Isser. But here, the halacha is like Shmuel, that NATBARNAT, that Torah is allowed. And therefore, I will read for you the Shulchan Aruch about it. Because the reason being that the reason why we follow Shmuel here is because very simply we see that Abaye and Chizkiah and many of the Amoraim were following his thing. So already in Talmudic times, they decided that it's an exception to the rule. Now here the Shulchan Aruch, in the laws of Basar B'chalav, meat and milk, in chapter 95 says, Dagim. This mamish halacha, the Shulchan Aruch paskins. Dagim shenitpashlu v'nitzlu. Whether these fish were fried or cooked or poached, however way you cooked them, prepared them for consumption, in a pot that was totally clean, right? So this pot, in the morning you had cooked some kosher turkey sausage or whatever in it. Now, for lunch or dinner the same day, you want to... But it's actually pristinely clean. There's no actual meat in this pot. That now you're cooking fish, there's no grease, no residue, perfectly clean, like a woman, cleans it. You're allowed to dip it into kutach, a dairy hummus type of dip. Mishum dahabe not and tambar not tam. We consider that the taste of any taste of meat that would be this, it's like two. You understand? It's not. Yeah, it's twice removed exactly. So it's kind of like watered down. It's not powerful enough to create any problems, to be considered dairy and meat together, which is absolutely forbidden. The imlo haitara kutzaya. But then, if chas v'shalom, it was like a sloppy yeshivish job, right? Like the guy, let's say, you had cooking the turkey sausage or whatever in the morning, and it wasn't cleaned appropriately, and then you fried the salmon, fish in it. Then, if there's 1/60th, if there's not 1/60th more of the fish that would, because we say if there's 60 times more of the taste, the mamashut, the grease, then it would be absolutely forbidden to eat this with the dairy, because we say that you right in the most classical everybody knows, already learns in first grade, is that you always need 60 times to be thinking. And then the Shulchan Aruch says another interesting case. Let's say a beitza, an egg, right? So common example of parv stuff that this halacha will be nogea to. Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef will bring many cases of barakas, like you had a mushroom baraka or potato baraka, you cooked it in a dairy oven or a meaty oven. But here the Shulchan Aruch brings another interesting case. It's a case of an egg. You cook this egg in a pot Then in the morning, let's say you had warmed milk in, or made pancakes in, right? Whatever. But now it's clean, and now you boiled a parva egg in it. You're allowed to take this egg and put it as a tudeli, as a stuffing for a chicken, right? Afilu lechatchila. Maran says this is also going to be a whole debate. Is it allowed lechatchila, which means do I have to go bend my back and find a dairy pan, or if on the dish rack there's a nice meaty pan and it's totally clean, I could just use it, and then later I could also have milk with my eggs. So he says, but he says something very interesting. He says that aval im nitbeshala bekedera im basar. But let's say this egg, it was boiled in a cholent, right? You know how people put tochmemor shabati inside cholent?
That's the only thing.
So it says, afilu beklipa asur la'achila bakotech. We don't say this is brought down the Beis Yosef, and the Gemara says, don't think the shell of the egg somehow protects it from becoming meaty. If you had put the egg in a cholent or abgusht, then it would be absolutely forbidden that the egg gets a status of meat. It's not parv anymore. You can't dip it in the kutach, right? Like the dairy hummus.
You can't eat with cheese?
Yeah, you can't eat with cheese anymore, right? Because it was in a pot of cholent. It was in a pot of chicken soup, right? Of choresh. So then, right? Because the some people say, oh, maybe the shell is gonna, but that we see that's not true. The shell doesn't have the power to be a barrier. So then it would be asur. Now here's the Ramah. The Ramah says yesh machshim b'sil bishul asur noten tam noten tam. Some people say in a case. Some people say it's better not to argue. They argue on this. So the Ashkenazim paskin, their custom is la'asor lechatchila. So Ashkenazim, in our case, with lechatchila, all these cases of the Shulchan Aruch, they don't do it, right? They have to go and find equipment and pots and pans that are the same status of what they want to have their eggs. Like, for example, so one of the most common cases that probably I have, Kanai Nara 6 kids, my daughter's probably asked me over 100 times, through 10 times each one of them, because as they get older they make their own breakfasts and they like to make all these gourmet omelets, is, oh Abba, I cut with a parva knife, right, all these different onions and mushrooms and peppers and stuff, and
Mushroom's not a sharp food.
Yeah, but onions, because one of the omelets, people a lot of times, onions is part of one of the most common things in omelet. So I cut it with a parv knife. Now, can I have this omelet with a glass of milk? And the pot that I fried it in, the eggs in, is meat, right? The answer is absolutely it's allowed, right?
Because
Ashkenazim
it's
say,
twice removed?
Yeah, because the taste has been so watered down. Ashkenazim would be machmar lechatchila, but let's say Ashkenazi by mistake it happened, nothing becomes asur, right? They lechatchila. This is, by the way, the whole problem with dairy equipment, us and them.
Why is it mutar again?
Because it gets watered down, the taste. We hold, like Shmuel, that the taste is not. It doesn't have a status. It basically becomes parv, even though it was. You understand? Because let me explain to you even better. What happened one time?
Cut out with the meat knife?
No. We're saying that everything prepared here was parv, right? Okay. Only the equipment that was meat. So you're telling me that the taste of the meat potentially went inside the egg. That taste is not strong enough to forbid you to eat it with a cup of milk. You understand?
What the egg you said is problematic?
No, for Lefias it's not problematic. If the pot, as long as the pot is clean, Moshe Chaim,
okay.
We says that the taste from the pot, the meaty pot, is so weak that it's not gonna be considered that you're having milk and meat together when you put a slice of cheese, let's say, on your omelet. Now, you understand? Obviously, you're not allowed to put the cheese in while it's frying because, right, you're not allowed to cook cheese in the meaty pan, right? But after you put it on the plate, are you allowed to put a nice, some people also need to have calcium. So, Lefidus Faradim, it's absolutely allowed. Now let's go on. So those are the two cases of Shulchan Aruch. Now, another big debate that the Ben Ish Chai and Rav Avadia and Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the Rav Avadia Yosef and his sons vehemently argue on is, why does the Shulchan Aruch say Shenit Alu? It happened. It doesn't say Shia, like go do this to begin with. So Rav Yitzchak Yosef says, don't come and learn like Rab Abdullah Somech and the Ben Ish Chai and the Kaf HaChaim, that they paskin like the Ashkenazim, that lechatchila you have to go through the hassle of finding, if you want to have the most common case that comes up in my life, that's what I'm going to take. The case of NATBARNAT is, you want to make eggs, scrambled eggs in the morning, go find a dairy pan to make it in if you want to have it with milk and cheese. No. He vehemently argues on that. Why? Because he says he says that this, even in the Shulchan Aruch, it says a lashon, because he explains why. There's three reasons why. First of all, the Shulchan Aruch many times, you understand, the Shulchan Aruch is based on the Gemara. The Shulchan Aruch is a very different system than the Rambam. The Rambam uses his own language. The Shulchan Aruch sometimes verbatim quotes the Rishonim. You understand? He's not using his original language. So already in the Gemara, it was brought down as it happened. But we see that Shmuel lechatchila allowed it, and Abaye and Chizkiya and all the Amoraim, that's why we pass on like Shmuel versus Abaye, versus, Rav. So Rav Yitzchak Yosef vehemently argues it, and he says that there's many Sephardi poskim that say it's mutar lechatchila, and then he goes on through a whole tangent that how koach the heteras, right? Anybody could be machmir always, but here's one part of the shir I want to definitely forget. Make sure I don't forget to bring up to you is, if anytime you want to understand the rationale, what's going on in the mind of the Shulchan Aruch, read the Bet Yosef, right? It's because it's two sides of the coin. Over there, he analyzes the he brings the Gemara, he brings the Rambam, he brings the Rishonim. So Maran clearly brings down all the poskim, the Rabbeinu. First of all, he brings the Balat Trumos, many poskim, many of the Rishonim that say it's mutar lechatchila, which means, you don't have to go through the hassle, and go up, put a ladder up and go find a milky pan. If it on your, mashallah, Baruch Hashem, right? You have a nice, clean, meaty pan on the griddle on the gas range. Boom, fire that up and make the eggs, and you could have all the cups of milk and different toppings. If you want to put dip it into cheese toppings, dairy toppings, you could. Why? Because in the Beis Yosef, he brings the Rabbeinu Yerucham that paskins like the Ashkenazim, that's only b'diavad, and he vehemently argues on this in the Bet HaKabayis. So you see that Maran is paskining not like the Ashkenazim, right? The dairy equipment is mutar lechatchila, and who are the acharonim? So to clearly stated, it's like this. There was a book called Sefer Chut HaMeshulash, which was a descendant of the Tashbetz. The Tashbetz was one of the original rabbis of Tunisia. He's a great Rishon. He clearly writes that NATBARNAT, right, is mutar lechatchila. The Bet David, which was one of the, anybody that wants to learn the laws of Shechita, he wrote one of the most classical books. He was one of the Rebbeim of the Chidah. He says it's mutar lechatchila.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. And the Mahari Yaish there's it's very funny. The Beis Yehuda, the Bet Yehuda, and Bet David both are matir, right? That he was also a contemporary. He holds that according to the Sfaradim, it's mutar lechatchila. No reason to go through a hassle of trying to find a dairy pot if you want to have your breakfast, or case of eggs or thing. And so therefore, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, here's more common examples in Israeli society. Let's say you have parva barakas, like, right, mushroom barakas, potato barakas. It's mutter to cook it in dairy equipment, as long as the dairy equipment is clean.
And
I'm
have
sorry,
it-
to cook it in meaty equipment
and have it with dairy.
and have it with dairy, just like the case of eggs, right? Even if that morning in that dairy equipment, in those pots and pans or whatever, or oven, that same day in the morning or earlier for lunch or breakfast, there was meat items, cooked or baked or thing, that as long as it's totally clean, the oven, the whatever, the pan, the pot, it's okay to have it with dairy. The chen mutar, and the same. Then he brings our case, the classic case of scrambled eggs, is also mutar, and he says that many Sephardic poskim are matter this lechatchila. Now, so that's the sugya not barnat. Now, just the one thing that I said in the beginning of this year is there's one case that could put a monkey wrench in this heter, and that is if chas v'shalom, what happens is, right, so let's go with the eggs case, right? So the eggs is, you're cooking the eggs in a meaty pan, but you cut it with a meaty knife. Now the problem is, remember, the Shulchan Aruch clearly says that there can't be any grease or residue on the pan, or else you need 60 times more, and it's b'diavad, and you know.
I mean,
So
it's all when it's very clean.
yeah. So the problem is, if you ever look at a knife, right by the handle where the wood part is or the metal part is, there's always a little bit grease. That's why many times as rabbis we always recommend. Persians have this obsession on Pesach to do hagalah, but it's very hard to do hagalah on knives because what happens is when you cut something with a knife, a lot of times the grease gets stuck into the. So he says that grease is mamashus, is the actual part. So when you cut something sharp, there's something called chosa veneer. So it causes the whole onion
To
become whatever the knife was. So then you wouldn't have this heter, because what happened, and then you could potentially would make your. Here's something else very important you have to be careful about. Since you cut it with if chas shalom, you would have cut it with a knife that is meaty. Now you pour it into a dairy pot. Don't quote me on this. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. Maybe in another shir we'll talk about it. But if I recollect correctly, the onions mamish get a status of meat, and through and you made your eggs in a dairy pan, it becomes treif. So you would need to do hechsher the pot and pan that you made it in. So this whole heter is fine and dandy as long as you're not cutting anything sharp like peppers, garlic,
onions,
not regular bell peppers, like the
Spicy
jalapeno peppers, spicy peppers. And we hope that everybody enjoys, and shalom al kol Yisrael.
Sag Baruch.